thank you so much. So now, I can't read his bio here.
That's okay, you don't have to.
So here's a little background about him. He's a professor of health promotion at Weber State University and is the director of the Weber State University Stress Relief Center. He earned a PhD in health education from SIU and his master's and bachelor's degrees in health promotion and psychology from BYU. He has taught at 6 institutions of higher education, including Southern Illinois University, Concord University, West Virginia University, Virginia Tech, and BYU. He has been teaching at Weber State for 18 years. Among others, the classes he teaches include the topics of high-level health, wellness, mental and emotional wellness, stress management, and wellness coaching. Mike has presented many classes, seminars, and workshops on stress management and wellness at the national, regional, and community level. He recently finished the 4th edition of a textbook he co-authored on stress management titled Stress Management for Life, a research-based experiential approach. This text is being used by colleges and universities around the country and Canada. He has published 2 additional books on stress management, The World is Not a Stressful Place, Stress Relief for Everyone. His most recent best-selling book is titled Unwind, 7 Principles for a Stress-Free Life, that was co-authored with Sam Bracken of the Franklin Covey Corporation. His professional website, stressmanagementplace.com, focuses specifically on stress management and wellness. He has produced video and audio containing instruction and guided relaxation exercises to help people more effectively manage their stress, and they are amazing. They really are. I use them every night. Most recently, based on his online academic course and teaching 30 years studying, teaching, and coaching people, he created an online training to help people everywhere manage their stress. Best of all, Mike has been happily married for 28 years and enjoys 4 amazing kids. And I think they're here today, right? 3 of them. So it's really great to meet you guys. And so, Dr. Olpin.
I'd rather not if it's
That's
okay.
fine.
I know it sounds great.
We'll probably have in the audience if people.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Well, thank you very much for letting me come spend some time with you all today. This feels good. This feels like a terrific place, and I'm quite honored to be in your presence. I really am. So, what are we going to do today? Whenever I do this, I always want to start out with questions, like, what do you want to know? But ultimately, it's always the same. What do I do about my stress? Why am I stressed? And I don't like that I have these problems that I feel are related to my stress. If I were to ask you, and I'd like this to be a discussion more than just me talking. If I were to ask you, do you have
I have a question.
you have a question?
I want to know why some people can handle it and others can't. It sends them on anything.
The stress.
The stress.
You want? She said she wants to know why some people can handle it and some people can't. As we go through today, I think it will help answer that question. When I mention the word stress, what comes to your mind that you would say, well, I know I'm struggling with this or that problem, and I'm pretty sure it's because of my stress? When I say that, does that make sense how I said that? When I say, I have this health problem, and it's probably because of my stress, what immediately pops into your mind as
Weight management.
weight management? Feel like there's a stress component there? Okay.
Blood pressure.
Can you tell that you have high blood pressure?
Well, no, but like if that's something you have, like they might say, the doctor might tell you, you need to reduce your
You need
your
to
stress
do something about your
levels or-
stress. And that's actually when I was in my 20s, I was diagnosed with high blood pressure as well. The doctor said, you're going to have to be on blood pressure medication for the rest of your life because you chose the wrong parents. You know? my mom had high blood pressure, and both of her parents had high blood pressure, and so the doctor said, and my blood pressure was quite high, and he said, too bad, you know, and I said, I do not want to be on a medication, dependent on a medication for a long time. Medications are fine for a little bit, but I don't want to be, especially when I was in my 20s, and I was eating well, and I was exercising, but I wasn't, my blood pressure was high, and so that was when I learned how to meditate. My wife and I both were trained in what's known as transcendental meditation. Soon after that, we both learned yoga back when nobody was doing yoga, back in 1988, 89, and my blood pressure went right to normal, and it's been normal ever since. Insomnia. Yeah, that's one that,
Anxiety.
very, so when you say, who said anxiety? When you say anxiety, what do you mean?
Sense of dread related to something that you're feeling challenged in.
So an upcoming
You're
something,
thinking about it.
and you get, what's the feeling that you have?
Tightness in the chest.
Okay, you can
Sometimes
feel that,
a-
right?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
Sometimes a feeling of loss of depth of perception. Like things seem to be withdrawn.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, good. Not good, but good. Okay, anything else?
Crabbiness and impatience.
Crabbiness and impatience, okay?
I've heard that disease is caused from dis-ease.
Mhm.
You know, that
Mhm.
stress causes a lot of disease. But for me, a lot of my stress settles in my shoulders, so my shoulders feel real tight, and my blood feels like it's boiling sometimes.
Your blood feels like it's boiling.
Yeah. Like just moving like really fast and just.
You could
know.
tell that, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's interesting, when we were doing the textbook, we were looking at all the different health concerns and health, the like, all the way from heart disease and cancer, number two killers, fibromyalgia, and everything, all the way down to headaches, and we found that stress is connected to all of those. The dis-ease is a very real thing. So my question then becomes, and I want to ask a bunch of questions, how is it, because when you're stressed, it starts out with kind of a, you said anxiety, which to me sounds like there's a thought that is, that there's some, you said impending doom or impending, how did you say that? Do you remember? It was something about a future something, and there was a sense of dread or a sense of yuckiness about it, yes?
A perception that you're a loss of control.
Yeah. So how is it that we can have thoughts about things that result in high blood pressure or an increased heart rate, or how is that even possible? So here, try this for a second. Just make your heart go faster. Go. Without standing up and talking. Just make yourself have high blood pressure. Just go. Just do it. It's not something that we consciously do, and yet we're pretty confident that these health problems that we struggle with, that there is a stress component. Now, I deal with stress, and it really is, I do 2 semesters of stress management and mind-body wellness, and to try and dial it into 45 minutes is going to be tricky. Because I think there's really 3 places where we can deal with stress. We can, I mean, there's 3, I have 3 approaches to stress. One is understanding stress, because I think once you really understand it, then you can finally do something about it. I remember what somebody called me up, somebody in Canada called me up. She was doing this thing for a magazine or a blog or something, and she said, her question, she asked me a whole bunch of questions, and one of the questions she asked was, what do you think is the #1 misconception that people have about stress? And I thought about that. I thought, that's a good question. And it occurred to me, I think the number one misconception that people have about stress is that stress happens to them. Like a pathogen, like a virus or a bacteria, where, you know, we hear all the time, we hear people all the time saying, man, this is stressing me out, or she is making me yucky, or he's doing this, or my job, or my boss, or whatever, is making me. That's the misconception that we have. But we don't ever really think about that. We just kind of, yeah, this is stressful. It's making me stressed. Once we understand how stress works, we immediately start to gain control over it. But until we do, then we're just doomed to whatever feels like is stressful. So we deal with stress from an understanding. And once we do that, we can start to prevent stress. We can actually, I believe it's possible to prevent maybe not all, but most of the stress that we experience. And then we also deal with the need to prevent, to turn it off, because sometimes we forget the other two parts. So what I would like to do for a little while today is just kind of focus on the understanding part, the understanding how the stress response really works. And this might be a little academic feeling. I mean, it would have been better if we'd all just gone to the yoga class. I mean, that would be as far as how we feel after we get out of here. But I hope that by the time we're done, you'll have a real change in your understanding of how the stress response. Because nobody's teaching you what I'm going to teach you. This is brand new. As far as if you went to your psychology classes or whatever health classes, they don't teach you this at all. And at least I've never seen it before, but once I got this understanding about, 15 years ago, this is the key that makes it so that we do change our life. So let's do this. Let's pretend that we have this scenario. Let's pretend that you and I are able to transport ourselves 100 generations ago in time. We're just able to time warp ourselves back to 100 generations ago. Okay, so now just picture that that's where we are. We're obviously not in a place that's really wonderful like this. No electricity, no phones, no cars, no anything comfortable. Let's just say, for the sake of this scenario, that we live out in the wilds. Yes, it's wild. And let's say that I have invited you over to my cave, and we've just killed some big animal. I don't know what we just killed, and it's cooking on the fire. You picture that? And we're just hanging out, having a good time. We've got our Fred Flintstone golf clubs, working on our short game. We're just enjoying each other, having a good time. We'll call that homeostasis. We'll call that ease. So we're not in dis-ease, we're in ease. I love that. We're just in ease. Now, I live near a forest, and we notice that there suddenly emerges from this, is that a word, emerges? Doesn't sound like it, right? There suddenly emerges from this forest a gigantic bear. Big black bear, and he's running straight at us. And it looks like he's running straight at you. He's really running straight to the food, but to you it looks like he's running straight at you. Big giant bear. Okay, can you picture that? All right. So now, what's the first thought that you're going to have when you see this bear coming at you? Okay, I heard run, run, and what did you say?
Oh, shit.
Okay. You're more accurate than you know. Okay, so I heard run. That's the second thought. The first thought sounds more like, and I'll just keep it. Uh-oh. That's the first thought. Yes. Why do you have that thought?
Because it's an unexpected situation, so suddenly you have to determine what's
And it's an unexpected situation that could result in what?
death.
Death. Yeah. The thought is, I could die. I'm in danger. Yes? Is that a conscious thought?
No.
No? You don't think?
Sort of.
Have you ever been somewhere where you're this far from a bear and not felt the least bit nervous? Where? In the zoo, right?
Bear World, yeah.
I heard about Bear World. I'd only heard about this last week. Another place where they play with the bears, apparently. Is that right?
Well, they're close. I mean, they're open. I mean, you can get fairly close.
But you don't have this thought going on, right?
But they're not looking at you like in the wild.
Yeah, yeah. See, this tells me, that tells me, even though it doesn't feel like it's a conscious thought. You have a choice about it. It's immediate, and you make that decision so immediately. It feels like it's unconscious, but you're still making a decision. Now, after you have that thought, then the next thing that kicks in is this thought of run. Or, what's the other? Fight, right? Why would you have either of those? And this is less conscious. Why would we have that take place?
Self-preservation.
Yes. If we don't run fast from this bear, we're going to die. If I don't fight, let's say my kids aren't so fast, so I'm just going to take my Fred Flintstone golf clubs and just beat the tar out of this bear so that I stay alive. Yes? Now, I don't think this is quite as conscious as this. This is more reactive. It's based on what they call the autonomic nervous system, sympathetic nervous system activity. And when that happens, an enormous flood of activity takes place. And the list really is gigantic for all the things that happen. So like, what could we say are some of the things? And we don't have to go through the whole list, but just so we understand.
Adrenaline.
So you have an increase in adrenaline. What's the other hormone? Cortisol, right? So you have increases in certain hormones. You also have a decrease in other hormones. You don't need those. Okay, what else?
Increased heart rate.
Heart rate goes up.
Higher breathing,
Breathing rate goes up.
muscle tense.
Yeah, muscle tension just in, and where specifically would you find more muscle tension?
Upper body,
Shoulders and chest? Somewhere.
the leg.
How come? Because that's going to give you strength to run and fight. It's a really long list. One of the most interesting ones, I think, is we can kind of look at our brain or our thinking patterns and separate it into two parts. Like we have, and this is poor representation, but we have one part of our brain that we'll call the Einstein brain, frontal lobe stuff, right? Our conscious, and we have another part that is the lizard brain, which is our more primitive part of us, hypothalamus, pituitary gland, all of those, the brainstem, all of those parts of us. Now, when we are in this fight or flight response, pretty much Einstein checks out. He kind of goes away. This frontal lobe thinking. When you come upon a lizard, you're walking along a trail and you come upon a lizard. What does that lizard do?
Reacts.
Does it go, you're tall? How is it that you're so tall and yet I'm bigger than this ant over here? How? Does it do that kind of Einstein think? No, it just goes, oh geez. And you chase it, and it doesn't care about theoretical constructs and reasoning. It just get out of there, and that's what happens to us when this kicks in. Einstein checks out. That's why when we're nervous about something, we don't think so well. And I think the sensory thing too. When you're in the stress response, do you notice? Like if you're running from the bear and you turn your ankle, are you going to feel that? You won't feel it, right? You'll feel it later. So, and we could go into all the different things. Stress response makes the immune system go down. I mean, virtually every system in the body, when this is happening, goes into a state of enormous imbalance. Every system. You go through the muscular, the reproductive system, the what? Digestive system. Yeah. So you mentioned gaining weight. That's interesting. Why is it absolutely natural that someone would gain weight as a reason? What is it that you do when you're stressed? You either eat a lot or you don't eat anything, right? How many are the don't eat anything? Can't eat anything. How many are the eat a lot? What is it that you eat when you are stressed?
Comfort.
It's high sugar, high fat, but we want it to taste good. The idea is our body wants that energy immediately, and sugar is the fastest thing to get in there. It's absolutely natural for us to eat that kind of food when we're stressed. And I think the comfort food piece as well, because when there's stress response, it doesn't feel good because everything's out of balance. And so I remember I had one student who I was working with who he was really struggling with depression and stress, just anxiety, just out. And he would tell us that Twinkies, he would go and buy big things of Twinkies because it was the only thing that made him feel good. He was struggling so deeply, and just that feeling of that, the one thing in my world that feels good. Okay, so, couple questions. So we got that, right? There's a whole list of things that take place. Every system in the body's out of balance. Now, let's think about our ancestors again. Let's picture what that was like. How long did it take them when they were being chased by the bear? How long did it take until they were either safe or dead? How long would you guess?
5 minutes.
5 minutes? You think that long? Like running?
Depends on if the bear's still chasing you or not.
Yeah.
Oh, we got somebody.
What?
He got the food off the stick, so we're good.
So we're good. How fast? Let's bring this to now. How fast can? Who is that guy? Usain Bolt. Is that how you say his name? Bolt? Is it B-O-L-T? How fast could he run the 100? Like less than 10 seconds, right? Could he? How fast? How long could he continue at that pace? Not very long. Maybe another 100. Maybe. After that, he's got to go into a different energy system to keep him going. But he has to slow down. When we're in this fight or flight response, this is only supposed to last for a little while. This is kind of what it looks like. If we were how do you say this? show how this looks.
Visualize,
Illustrate, that's the word. So we're going at homeostasis, and time's going this direction. And then a bear shows up. We'll call this bear a threat. This, right? And so immediately we have this activation of the fighter, and we don't have to make any of that happen, it just does. We don't have to say, come on, heart, get going, come on, breathing, get going, come on. Blood pressure increase, muscles tense. We don't, it just does. And so for a little while, we were, that says F or FL, if you can't read it, fight or flight. It lasts, as nearly as I can tell, 15 to 30 seconds. And then it's supposed to turn off where we go down to this phase of we're exhausted. And then we rest, and then we come back to homeostasis, to ease again. So here's ease, here's ease. And this is how it's supposed to happen. Okay. Now, let me ask you guys this question. If we were to look at our life today, what percentage of your life on a day-to-day basis would you say, are you in situations where this really could happen? Do you know what I mean?
Less than 1%.
You think? Why do you say that?
Because generally we're in a safe environment all the time.
It feels
Even-
like
even
this
when we're
most of
driving
the
a car.
time. Yeah.
Even when we're in a car, we're not sensing danger necessarily. It's only when the guy pulls in front of us, you know.
Right. Which lasts that long, right? I was talking to a friend of mine. He was telling me about now they have cars. You know how you have seat warmers? Now they have seat coolers in cars. How comfortable do we need to be? We have made our society so safe and so comfortable, and I'm not against that. But if we're, and yes, you're right, less than 1% of the time are we in dangerous situations, and for some of it, it's never. I go through my class, and I've had cops, I've had firemen and whitewater rafting guides, and even they will say it's still less than 1% of the time that they're in really dangerous situations. So if we are in if we are so rarely in dangerous situations, and this stress response has only one purpose, and this is really important for us to know. As far as the scientists who are studying this understand it, as far as I understand it, this stress response has only one purpose, and only one purpose, and that is to keep us alive in the presence of a physical danger. It doesn't have a single other purpose for it being a part of us. But we like that it's there because there are those really rare occasional times when we want to, be able to run super fast or be super powerful. But they're so rare, yeah.
Is it possible that certain people this doesn't turn on? Because, like the deer in the headlights thing, a lot of times people will freeze.
Freeze is a third one, yeah.
Yeah.
That is a third one where,
They want to scream, but they can't.
Yeah.
Or,
and I think it's still this, but there's some overriding, because in some cases freezing is the best defense. I remember I had one student who she was camping, and she did find herself in the presence of a bear, and she'd been trained in outdoor stuff a lot, kind of like she was always out in the wilds, and she remembered she was camping and a bear did show up, and she remembered, okay, best thing I could do is just freeze. And so she went up against a tree, and she was just like this, and the bear came up to her and just kind of went with her, she was kind of like this, and she was freaking out. I mean, you can imagine, but She remembered, gotta stay still, gotta stay still, gotta stay still. And finally the bear went away. So there is some defense mechanism with freezing that is part of this. So yeah, that's an excellent point. Now, the question then, let's return to that question. This is only designed to keep us alive in the presence of physical danger, the only reason for stress. If we are never, or very, very rarely, in the presence of physical danger, why would we ever have stress even be a thing for us?
Not emotional, you said.
But the stress response doesn't help for emotional situations. You're right, but the stress response, again, it's only designed for physical danger.
We can imagine things happening.
What do you mean?
You use the word dread. We've been uncomfortable maybe, in our past, and we can remember that, and so we fear that in the future, so it kind of just hangs out.
Yeah. Here's what I think. Kind of dovetailing on what both of you said. See, right now, we have 10th century BC bodies. Our bodies have not changed over the past 100 generations. But we have 21st century minds. Yes? We think in terms of here and now. And so our bodies can't see what's happening out here. The endocrine system, the nervous system, the muscular system, they're not looking out here going, shut up, you're not in danger. There's no bear here. They're just listening to what you're saying about the situations. And here's the rub. If our body ever hears anything that sounds like this, see, when you went to the Psych 101 class or the health class, they taught you, here's where it happens. But the reality is, this is the activator of all of our stress. And if we have the thought, oh no, she looked at me weird. Or, oh no, I've got a project that's due and I'm only halfway through and I'll never make it. Our body doesn't know that's not a bear. And so because we're 10th century BC bodies, they think it's a bear. Our bodies thinks it's a bear. And the only way that it knows how to handle a bear is fight or flight response. The only way. It hasn't caught up to 21st century situations where the stress response isn't useful when we're doing 99% of the things that we do.
So the media causes problems for us.
Give me, what do you mean by that? That's a good point. What do you mean by that?
School shootings. I mean, everybody thinks there's going to be a school shooter.
Yeah, they like us to think that the world is a stressful place and that everything is a threat. See, I'm of the opinion that, this point right here, it has to be perceived. Shoot. Try and write this again. This right here has to be perceived. Why? Because it's not real over 99% of the time. So it has to be perceived. We have to have some thought, oh no, this is whatever. And the news loves for us to be afraid. They love for us to perceive, oh, this is a stressful place. So if you'll keep watching me, then I'll tell you more. And we just get addicted to that. Oh man, there's terrorists and so now take these drugs that are being advertised so you'll feel better about the terrible place that we live in. See, I'm of the opinion the world is not a stressful place. I don't think the world is, by its nature, stressful. I go outside at my house. I mean, I'll watch the news, and I'll, oh man, and then I'll go outside my house, and it's a nice day. And every day for the last 50-some years that I've been alive is like that. It's a nice day. And yeah, we have things that happen that are tricky, but none of them are, or very few of them are, where having the stress response on helps out. Does that make sense? So, in our stress class, in the stress management class, and in the mind body wellness class as well, we treat stress from two different places. We treat stress from here, where we prevent it from happening in the first place. And that is 100% a focus on how we think. It has to be. If it's a perceived threat, the uh-oh thought, if we can get rid of that. See, I believe this is a mathematical equation in my mind. No threat thought, no stress. No threat thought, no stress. There's an equal sign in between there. You don't have a threat thought about something, then it'll just be an event that you'll deal with, and yeah, it's important. Yeah, it's could be tricky, but the stress response and the corresponding imbalance that goes along with it is unnecessary and not helpful. I saw him.
I heard that all fear is a lie, because fear is something that may or may not happen in the future, and that fear causes, a lot of that stress. So it's fake that we're stressing about things that might not happen.
Yeah, we spend a lot of time. That's such a brilliant point. We spend a lot of time in both of my classes focusing on the fact that you're always here and now. Consciously, you can only be here and now. I should say physically, experientially, you can only be here and now. Fear is a future thought that is imagined, and there's a threat that's thrown in there. I mean, sure, it's okay to think in the future and go, oh yeah, we'd like to go to Hawaii, and we're going to go to Kauai, and all these things. But as soon as you add a threat thought into that future thinking, your body doesn't know that you're not in Hawaii right now. It just is listening to, okay, no threat thought. Oh, but I hear a threat thought there. So stress response turns on. Can't help it. But it's making stuff up about what's not happening entirely. And I'm not saying, okay, never be afraid, never be angry, never be all these things. But what I am saying is, we, with this understanding, can start to gain control over our stress and over any emotion, where we can say, I'm deciding to be afraid, or I'm deciding to be angry, rather than the world is making me this or that emotion. Fear is a perfect example of that. So we try our very best in the class to help people to understand, how do they prevent this from happening? How do they, in their thinking, prevent the threat thought from happening? That once it does happen, you kind of have to just figure out how to turn it off, which is, yoga, meditation, relaxation, massage, exercise, all those things that do work to turn off the stress response. But to my mind, we're smarter still if we can figure out how to prevent it in the first place. Okay? Now, before I get to there's 3 questions that work universally most of the time to prevent it. Are there any questions to this point? Anything that you're wondering, what about?
What prevents people from, accepting ownership and responsibility for their behaviors and the experience that they have?
What prevents them from taking ownership? Well, I think that the whole perception that life happens to them instead of they're experiencing life and can choose to have a say about how they experience it. I think it's just that perception. Do you know what I mean? If you look at me weird, right? Close enough. If you look at me weird, I can either go, oh man, you don't like me, and I'm, oh geez. Or I can go, well, that's a funny looking face, and kind of cool that you did your mouth just like that. One or the other is, I mean, the one is I'm choosing how I react to what you're saying, how I respond to it, and the other is reacting in a reflexive kind of teenager whack way. I don't know, that,
Don't we develop that capability? I don't think inherently, when we're young, we start out feeling the world as something we perceive.
for sure.
I think we start as something that happens to us.
I think almost every case, this perception, I mean, little kids, they're not afraid of snakes or spiders until somebody teaches them or they feel the pain of a snake or a spider, right? Or anything that is potentially stressful. I think just about all of it is learned. It's conditioned, we're trained, whether it's through the media or through our parents or through our own experiences. Yeah, I don't think we come, the psychologists tell us that people basically start off with only 2 fears. Do you know what those are? Do you remember?
Fear of abandonment?
That might be a third. There's still some possibility of that one.
Dark.
Not dark. Falling and loud noises.
Oh.
The psychologists say, and possibly abandonment. The 3 things that we're inherent. Every other fear is a learned fear. If it's a learned fear, logically, you can what with those? You can. They're unlearnable. That's not the right word, but they're able to be unlearned. Yeah. So we have some say in the matter about the whole point of all of this that we're talking about is, can we start having more say in how we feel about things? And I'm not saying never get angry, never get sad, never feel jealous or anything, but recognize those are your, kind of what you're saying. I'm taking responsibility for those things. If I'm taking responsibility for those things, then I can do something about them. And it's okay to have them still. You want to take them away from you. Sadness is a wonderful thing. You know, it's okay. As long as we realize I'm choosing sad here, and that's okay.
My only question is, this sounds a lot to me like Stoicism.
Very much so.
Oh,
yeah.
okay, so,
Yeah.
yeah, I was just curious.
Stoics were right on the nose with a whole bunch of things.
Sounds like what?
Stoicism. Plato and some of the Greeks were very, very focused on thinking became. See, I strongly believe that we don't have feelings willy-nilly. We think thoughts that turn into feelings, and that's straight from the book of Stoicism. We start with a thought that turns into a feeling. And that's a whole nother class. It's really good.
So, I had a question.
Yeah.
Like, sometimes you have had a very bad experience, and you learn from that.
Yeah.
And your body has the automatic responses.
Give me an
learns.
example.
Like the
Well,
PTSD.
PTSD, yeah.
Yep.
You've been in a war or something
Yep.
and bombed out, and, you know, a loud noise all of a sudden becomes that much more significant and triggers you and that. So that goes kind of to a different level at that point, doesn't it?
Yeah, see, the body is still more important than anything is stay alive. And if it's been in a situation where it's had to condition itself to stay alive, anything that feels like those conditions, it's going to retain those until you work those out. I mean, I've worked with people with PTSD, and it is possible to not have those any longer, which tells me it's still serious and it's still big time, but you can also do something about that. It's not easy. You can't just wave your magic wand and, right? But that's an excellent point. Now, in any situation that we find ourselves, if we want to really, truly prevent our stress, in any situation we can ask ourselves 3 questions, and if we answer those 3 questions, you prevent the threat thought. See, the whole idea of this is how can I prevent the threat thought? No threat thought, no stress. So the 3, and you have to be accurate, and this is a conversation you're having just with you. You're not having this with anybody else, you're having it kind of with your systems. It's your higher order thinking talking to your more primitive parts of you, telling it, okay, I'm okay. And we do this with 3 questions. And the first question is, am I in danger? Only not, like you mentioned, not emotional danger. Am I in physical danger? Is there a real bear coming at me? Now, what's the answer to that 99.9% of the time? No. Now, it might still feel like, man, this is serious and this is tough and I gotta... But can you do it without the imbalance of the stress response? That's what I'm after. We still have hard things. Every one of us has hard things. Every one of us has challenges. Every one of us has really, really difficult times. And can we do it without the stress response going on? So this is what we're doing, is making that be the case. Because I don't want high blood pressure. I don't want a heart that's resting at 84 beats a minute. I don't want to be breathing like this all the time. It's not healthy. It's not useful. So I don't want my shoulders to be on fire all the time. So we ask ourselves, am I in physical danger? And we consciously say, okay, I'm not going to die here. I'm not going to die here. And your body's going, oh, okay. If that's the case, then good. And then it's still important and still serious what you're doing, but you're not adding the physiology that wants you to run or fight something. That's the first question. The second question we can ask is, can I handle this? Without dying? Because control is a big part of this sense of, can I handle it without having this physical danger occur to me? Now, what's the answer to that pretty much most of the time?
Yes.
It is yes, but how do you know?
You've handled it before.
Yes, you've done it before, or you've seen somebody else. What's the number one, and it doesn't happen in our culture quite so much, but what's the number one social fear
Speaking.
in our country? What?
Speaking.
Public speaking is number one. I have seen surveys where public speaking was higher than death as a fear. Now, have you ever in your lives seen anyone public speaking die? The closest you ever saw, I don't know, maybe if the stress, but I mean a physical, somebody going after something. The closest I ever saw, and some of you might remember this, was George Bush. He was in Saudi Arabia or somewhere, remember? Somebody pulled off his shoe and hucked it at him. Do you remember that?
Yep.
What did he do?
Ducked.
He ducked. Stress response kicked in for just long enough. Right? And then what did he do? Went back to his speech. Stress response kicked in for just long enough to him recognize, uh-oh, And then you went back to, that's the closest I've ever seen of anyone public speaking having a physical danger. So what that tells me is, even the most fearful thing, we can probably handle it. Either I've done it before, you know, I've spoken in front of groups, so why would this be any different? I've gone to important meetings with people and had important interviews with, or whatever. Why would this be any different? Now, you're doing this you're talking with your body, telling it, no threat, no threat, there's no threat, there's no bear. Okay, good to that point? The third question that we could ask ourselves, and this is what we spend virtually half of one class and half of the other on, because it's so important. It is the crux, it is the absolute game changer question. And it is this: can I think about this differently? Can I think about this differently? Can I think about this in a way that does not include a threat thought? Now, if we're thinking individuals, which we are, we understand we have a choice in what we think about in general, yes? You can think about anything you want. It's called agency or whatever you want to call it. We have the ability to think anything. If that's the truth, then in any situation, we can decide, oh, I'm going to think differently about this than the way I've been conditioning myself to think. You know, rush hour traffic, and you're late for a meeting. Oh man, I'm going to be late. I know bad things are going to happen, and oh, geez. You know, all these future thoughts. What could you do? Because your body's just going, okay, there's another threat thought, okay, another threat thought, okay, another threat thought, okay. Because it doesn't know that you're sitting safely in your warm or soft, cold seated car. It just knows, okay, she keeps saying threat thought, so I better turn on the fight or flight response. So what could you think while you're driving in the car that is where there is no threat thought in that sentence? What else could you think?
It's the best excuse you can come up with.
There's still a little threat in that one. You know, something bad might happen. But get a little closer to,
Acknowledge the actual situation you're in. I'm sitting in a car, I'm moving slowly, there's no harm.
Be mindful, yes.
My love is warm.
Yeah, this feels so good, or this feels so cool, and
Not a bear in sight.
there's not.
Not a bear in sight.
This is safe, you know, and I really think you can turn to thoughts like what you guys use as one of your, what do you call it, motto or core values, where you just accept. Oh, I'm in this car, and this is how fast I'm going today. And I'm going to choose to listen to some music or look around. I don't often get to see things because I'm always going 80. And now I'm going 30, so I can see more of what a beautiful place we live in. Wow, that's kind of cool. Do you hear a threat thought in any of that? No threat thought, no stress. And we spend so much time on how could you think of this differently? My feeling is, and I think that's why we love humor so much. You don't hear a threat thought when you hear somebody telling a joke. Or you see somebody like, we always like to, Whose Line Is It Anyway is one of our favorite TV shows. And my wife and I, we'll have a rough day, a busy day, and we've noticed that Whose Line is on from 9 until midnight now. And we just keep watching it because we know that as we think about those funny things, there's no threat thought going on, and so we're like, by the end of the day, because I don't think we should take threat thoughts with us to sleep, because I think that's why we stay awake, worrying about what's coming up or lamenting what did happen, and our body's going, well, you're giving me threat thoughts, and all I know when there's a threat thought is run, which is not the same as sleep. Correct? So we will do something that keeps us, where our thinking is lighter. And our bodies go, oh, thank you. Now, when I lie down, I know what to do. Sleep. Boom. And my wife gets mad at me all the time because it's like 10 seconds. You're asleep. Why are you? She takes 30 seconds and I take 10.
Yeah.
But in all of my studying of this, there is one thought. There's all kinds of things, accepting and allowing and being mindful, but there's one thought that I think is the most powerful toward the prevention of the threat thought, the prevention of stress, and that is thankfulness, of gratitude. And forgiveness is kind of implied in there, but it's impossible. I don't think, and I've really tried to work this through to see if there's an exception, I don't think it's possible to be grateful, to be thankful for something, and to be stressed simultaneously. I don't think, and think it through in your own minds and see if that follows for you. I mean, think of, like, you're driving in your car and your thought is, man, I'm so grateful I have a car. I'm so grateful I have a job. I'm so grateful that that my body's working today, that I'm 6 feet above ground. Remember, I had one student, he was in his 70s, and he'd had a heart attack, and the doctor told him, he said, they fixed him. I mean, fortunately, they fixed him, and the doctor said, now you have to go and do something that is where you don't have any stress. You got to go relax. And he said, well, what should I do? Asking the doctor, and the doctor said, I don't know, you just got to do something. So he ended up in my class, and we were having this conversation about this threat thought thing, and he had created his own rule of thumb or motto, or his core value was a day above ground's a good day. Because he really was, this close to death, and the fact that he didn't have that happen and he was able to enjoy whatever it is that he was experiencing, hard or easy, tough, and that was the one that he used. And I think that's kind of a beautiful way to look at things. I mean, if you just walked around and just said, wow, how beautiful it is that we have, that I could go walk on the trails this morning, or I could go get on a bike, or I can just walk and be, ambulatory. It's a word I've never said. Ambulatory. That we have that, I mean, just look around. Things are pretty great. You have all these wonderful people around you. And yeah, you have some people who you struggle with, but you get to struggle with them. What if you weren't at all in the first place? What if you didn't get to have those experiences? And so you consciously say to yourself, okay, I'm just gonna be I'm not gonna try and stop stress, because I think what you resist tends to persist. You try to not have something happen, it's more likely it's going to happen, the more you resist it, in general. And so rather than do that, just focus on what are the thoughts I can have that are without a threat. Gratitude. Okay, I'm just going to be grateful. And I think, man, I'm grateful I have a job. I'm grateful I have shoes that can walk on the trails that will get me to my job. There's no end to it. And all the while your body's going, I'm going to stay at ease. I'm going to stay at ease. And really think that's, I mean, you can go into your own experience and test that for yourself, and I'm sure all of you have tested that for yourself, where you recognize the thing that I want to do with today is just kind of get you to think, okay, this is, not only is it a wonderful way to think all the time, but it's also preventing my stress. And if you forget, and if you have rough things, you know, and you start forgetting about it and your body, you're going up on that fight or flight, then do something that will turn it off. Do the yoga, do meditation, do relax, go for a walk, exercise, work out. You know, do something that puts you through that stress response. That's why I love exercise, because when you exercise, you're actually doing the thing that your body is designed to do when there's a bear. So you're actually following through on that. That's why we feel so good after we're done exercising. So we still need those things. Do hobbies, you know. And so there's kind of both of those. Prevent it from turning on, turn it off after you do. Okay. And I have no idea what time it is or how long we're supposed to go, and do you have any questions? Because I could go on for hours and hours, and I'd be happy to just, I feel like I've talked way too much anyway. What questions do you have?
My big one is I'm afraid of blood draws, shots, and that type of thing. So I know I'm not gonna die. I can tell myself that. But still, the last time I was in the doctor and I needed to have stitches, I went into a panic attack. And even though I'm like telling myself all this stuff, it doesn't stop. And I did have an experience as a 5-year-old where I was abandoned because my mother took my brother or sister to the bathroom, and I got called up to go get my blood work done, and I did it all by myself, and I walked out of there, and then since that time, I've never been able to do it again. And I can find, if I actually go to a pediatric to get my blood draw done, if I do it in front of children, I'm okay. But I did it in front of my husband, and I just about passed out on the table.
Yeah.
And I couldn't calm down. So I'm like, how do I get over that, and what's with the different scenarios that I've noticed?
Yeah, so in psychology they have, so let me ask you this. Do you have to get your blood drawn?
No, well, I mean, they want to, but.
They
no,
do want to, but you won't.
Right.
So in psychology, and this works for most things that we're afraid of, they have a thing called systematic desensitization, which means, like, if I'm afraid of going in an elevator, claustrophobia or whatever, then what you do is you take the person, or you would on your own, you'd go and you'd say, okay, I'm going to be 30 feet away from that elevator and not go get in it, but I'm going to be 30, and then get my self-talk, okay, from this far away, I'm okay. I can handle this. You know, these questions. And then the next time, you go 25 feet away. So you're not in there yet, but you're consciously reconditioning your body based on thoughts that are more accurate. Because you know you're not going to die, right? That's what you said. You know you're not going to die, but there's a pain there or something about that your body doesn't want. So you just move in the direction of it a little bit at a time, not a lot. And each time your self-talk, and if that self-talk goes back to, oh no, I can't handle it, then you step back a little bit from it, and it might just be seeing the hospital building or the clinic or wherever it is you're going to do, and just from your car, and just going, okay, my self-talk is, I can handle this, no bear, how could I think of this differently, okay, this is a good thing for me, it probably benefits me somehow. And then you do, just systematically, you get a little bit closer and a little bit closer, and when you feel that, then you step back a second and fix that, get that self-talk. And I'm not saying you do it in a second, but if it's something that is useful for you that you need to do, then there's a few other ways, but that's the most logical one. I don't know.
I got a follow-up on that. So my children have that
as like their biggest fear? How do I
Getting
help?
blood?
Yeah, or just getting a shot.
A shot.
Or anything like that. So I love this idea, but how do I use the same method to help my children get over this fear? What's the best way to do that?
Yeah, it's tough when it's a child because they're, yeah, they're at that age. The processing of those kind of thoughts is not really even possible in their minds to think it through. I mean, I'm thinking of, let's say, a 5-year-old. It doesn't make sense to them to go, well, am I in danger? Because in their minds, it's going to hurt.
My
Right.
kids are 10 and 12, so they're a little bit older.
A little bit more,
But
okay.
not a lot.
Yeah, and I mean, I think every parent struggles with that, with, how do you get them over this fear and that fear and that anxiety, and I don't have a lot of good answers for kids, because I don't know. My wife is much smarter than I am when it comes to anyone younger than 10. I don't know, what would you say?
We have a 10-year-old who, I think he was born with social anxiety. I mean, not really social anxiety, but any new change freaked him out. I mean, he wanted to play baseball so bad, he'd go to practice, but when the game came, I was out there with center field with my son, and people thought I was nuts, but for him, the more knowledge he has about it before he goes, like we watch a video, we'll go watch another person have it done. The more knowledge, then they feel more control about it, and then he's sort of gotten through things a lot easier now. So it's a lot of prep work. The more prep, the more background you can do, the better. And if they understand why they're getting it too, I mean, not just mom's taking me out getting a shot, but I love you so much because I don't want you to get sick, kind of a thing. Then they know that there's more control and you're on their side and people are just trying to help them.
Heather?
It's still hard.
Yeah. Also, like with the immunizations, I've gone through this with my kids, just nobody wants to get poked with a needle, but show them why we get immunizations, what polio did to children, the science behind it, why we do that, like, do you want to protect yourself from this and have that be a part of that choice, yes, I want to be protected from that disease, I want my body to work, and like my kids, they're fine with shots now, but I've really educated them a lot. This is why we get this immunization, and here's what it used to do, and we don't have that anymore because of immunizations.
Go ahead.
Yeah, normalization through play. So having a doctor's kit with the pretend needle, and having them do that, if it's normalized through play, they can see that as a normal thing in society. They're not still gonna like it, but some part of the process will be normal.
That's beautiful. That makes perfect sense. No threat thought in there with play. That's why I think we love play so much, is because there's no threat thought going on in that. Thank you, that's beautiful.
I have a different question.
Yeah.
And this may be beyond the scope of what you want to talk about, but where does depression fit in? Is that
Yeah.
evolutionary as well?
So here's my thinking on depression, and there's no one cause for depression, for sure. But in terms of stress, when you're in the fight or flight response, you have certain hormones that crank, primarily cortisol. Cholesterol, that's funny. Cortisol and adrenaline, right? The rest of your hormones are they're going to sit over on the shelf for a while because you don't need them. You don't need serotonin, you don't need melatonin, you don't need dopamine, maybe, but it's still not in the game. Those are just kind of on the shelf. Now, if you're in the stress response for any amount of time, those hormones don't know that it's what's going on out here. They're just going, she keeps saying, uh-oh, so I guess I'll just hang out until it is time for me to feel better, and the hormones will get in the action. And so when you go to the doctor and and the doctor says, okay, you're depressed. And you say, well, why am I depressed? And he or she says, because you have a chemical imbalance. He or she is right. My question is, what caused the chemical imbalance? And from a stress perspective, that's why. Because your hormones in the fight or flight response, the feel good, the feel happy, the kind of not be depressed hormone, they're not in the game. It's the same reason why people get sick when they're stressed. Immune system, there's almost a direct relationship, an inverse relationship. As the stress response goes up, the immune system goes down. And that's been measured all kinds of ways. As the stress response goes down, the immune system, that's why people who meditate a lot rarely ever get sick. Because the immune system's functioning well. And that's why when doctors hopefully are saying, you know, still we want to take care of this to a certain degree with medication, but they're also saying you need to exercise. Why do they need to exercise? Because when they exercise, they go through the stress response and come out of it just like we would if we were running from a bear. And so that's why they say this is such a good thing. I mean, there's plenty of evidence that exercise all by itself or combined with medication is better than medication alone for depression. And I'd say it's that way. I remember I had one student had fibromyalgia so bad that it hurt her to wear a shirt. We all know what fibromyalgia is, right? It hurt. It's just, you know, like arthritis only in the muscles. It hurt her to wear a shirt. And so she would take medication, but when she took the medication, she was dizzy. She couldn't think straight. But it helped the pain. And so one day we were doing meditation in class, and I said, or she just did this on her own. She deliberately didn't take any of her medication. And she said it took her 4 hours to get to school, to Weber State. And after we did meditation, taught them how, and then we did it. It's not a hard thing to learn. After it was over, she came up to me and she was crying. And I thought, oh, what have we done? And we'd been working quite a bit during the semester with her pain because it was so bad. And the relaxation was working, but I didn't know how the meditation would result for her. And she was crying, and I thought, really, are you okay? And she goes, you have no idea. She said, while we were meditating, I could feel the pain just coming off my arms and out my hands. And I said, do you feel okay? She said, I haven't felt this good in I don't know how long. And another lady who had headaches every day for 20 years. She tried everything under the sun. And we did meditation with her, taught her how to meditate, how I do in the class, and her headache just went away. No headache. Started with a headache, ended without it. And it was pretty intense every day. And she didn't have any more headaches after that. And when she started to get headaches, I saw her a year later, and she looked younger. She looked better. I could just say she was just in the gym where my class started. And I said, how are you doing? I remembered she had been in the class. How are you doing? And she said, really good. I remembered she had the headaches. I said, have you had any headaches since? She said, no, I don't get headaches anymore. And she said, when I do get headaches, I know this is what I do. I meditate. And when I do start to feel a headache coming on, I meditate. And no headaches. And it makes perfect sense. All of the disorders that we struggle with, where there is a stress component, I know there's other variables for sure, but stress makes every one of them worse because of the imbalance physiologically that is inherent in the fight or flight response. And so when we turn those off, when we get you back to normal, the body goes, oh, good, now I can heal when I'm in ease. And that's exciting stuff. That's really fun to do. Any other questions? I've been here way too long. I'm sure for you guys.
I have one.
I was just gonna say, this sounds a lot like acceptance commitment therapy. That I read a book about, like, it was called, what was the title? Get Out of Your Mind and Into Your Life.
Very well could be.
You're good. No, just.
Sounds like it's along those lines of, you know,
Yeah.
your mind creates all these monsters or whatever. And if you learn to turn that off and live your life in
Yeah.
spite of the fact that you have those things that you believe are there that aren't really there, then you can live a more effective life.
Yeah, I mean, it's all about still having everything that we do. It's kind of like we're on a roller coaster and there's ups and downs.
Yeah.
But you can just buckle up and enjoy the ride or freak out about the ride. Either way, you're on the roller coaster.
Yeah, you're not getting off.
Well, it's been my pleasure being with you today. I've really enjoyed spending a few minutes with you, and I hope it was helpful. If you have questions or concerns or anything that you'd like to continue this conversation with further down the road, I'd be happy to. And I will send to you my email address and our contact information for our class and the different tools that we have, so that you can have that available for you and the people who you love and care about. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Olpin. Really appreciate being here. Thank you. Well, this is a little bit longer than what we typically would